"You're not just in the way, you're a mistake he made." Veronica's voice was sharp, bitter, and final. With a sudden shove, she pushed Ava hard, sending the pregnant woman stumbling backward off the edge of the cliffside trail. Ava didn't have time to scream. Her body smacked into branches on the way down, arms flailing as she crashed through layers of thorns and pine needles. Her forehead scraped against a jagged rock before she landed hard on her side, breath knocked from her chest, at the edge of a cold stream. The wind carried a faint echo of gravel crunching above, Damon's black SUV slowly reversing, back tires turning without a single pause. From inside the vehicle, Damon sat calm, sunglasses low on his nose, watching the final seconds of his wife's silhouette vanish into the forest abyss. He didn't say a word, just nodded once. Then the car backed up and rolled away, dust rising behind the tinted glass. Veronica dusted off her hands and turned, brushing her blonde hair from her face with a grin. The job was done. Or so she thought. Down below, Ava blinked through tears and dirt, disoriented. Her hand clutched her side as she tried to sit up, face bruised, dress torn. She crawled forward on her elbows until her fingers landed on a flat wooden board, a forest sign half buried under moss and leaves. Her eyes locked on the bold red letters, "Caution, wild bear territory, entry prohibited." She coughed, a metallic taste in her mouth, and looked around. There was no path, no sound of people, no road noise. Just trees, shadows, and silence. She moved slowly, afraid to stand, worried her legs might give out under the weight of the pain. Her belly ached. Not the kind of dull ache she'd gotten used to in recent weeks, but something sharper, something wrong. She gritted her teeth and pressed both palms against her belly, trying to calm herself. Her breaths came in short gasps. She whispered, "Please, not now, not here." She reached down, patting the ground frantically. Her purse was gone. Her phone, where was her phone? Her heartbeat raced as she crawled a few feet back toward the scattered leaves and pine needles. There, partly buried in damp dirt, was the corner of her phone. The screen was cracked, but not shattered. A tiny red light blinked. It was still recording. Somehow, the fall hadn't killed the battery. Her fingers trembled as she brushed it off and tucked it beneath a thick layer of moss, praying it would stay hidden, in case someone found it later. High above, the wind rustled the trees, but closer to her, something else moved. A branch snapped, loud and deliberate. Ava froze. She glanced around. The sun had started to dip, turning everything gold and shadowed. Her eyes moved from tree to tree, searching. There was nothing, but the hairs on her arms stood up. That wasn't wind. She dragged herself toward a fallen tree, limbs shaking, every inch of her body screaming for rest. Her foot hit a rock. Pain shot up her leg. She bit her lip to keep from crying out. She couldn't make noise. Not here. Not with that sound still behind her. A low grunt echoed from the trees. She knew that sound. She'd grown up watching wildlife documentaries, hearing about black bears in the region. But hearing a bear on TV wasn't the same as hearing one from 10 feet away. Her pulse thundered in her ears. She pressed herself into the earth, hand wrapped around a root, eyes wide. Another snap, louder this time. And then silence. Ava didn't move. She barely breathed. Her dress was soaked through with mud, her knees scraped, her ankles swelling fast. She could feel the heartbeat of her unborn baby, or maybe she imagined it. She didn't know anymore. All she knew was that she had to live, not just for herself, but for whoever was kicking gently in her womb, right now, in the middle of bear country, with no one to call and no one coming. The woods grew darker around her. As she lay beneath the tree, listening to the forest, the quiet suddenly felt like a threat. Every sound became a signal. Every second dragged like an hour. But she refused to cry. Not here. Not yet. The air grew colder. Something distant let out a long, low breath. She closed her eyes and whispered one thing again and again. "Hold on." And the forest watched. Ava's entire body ached as she pulled herself up, fingers sinking into the damp earth and gripping onto a root to find balance. Her legs shook with every small step, but she kept moving forward, dragging her right foot slightly through the creek's shallow flow. The cold water stung her skin but numbed the pain just enough to keep going. Her dress clung to her like a wet bandage, torn at the hem, blood dried along her shin where she'd scraped herself. She moved slowly, carefully, like prey trying not to draw attention. The trees seemed to lean over her, their shadows stretching longer with every passing minute. Her foot landed in a soft patch of mud, and she paused. That wasn't just any indentation, it was a paw print.
Big.
Too big. Bigger than her entire hand.
Fresh.
She bent down, heart thudding, and touched the edge. It was still moist, the outline sharp. It hadn't rained. Whatever made this print had passed through recently. She scanned the woods in every direction. Nothing moved, but she could feel it. Something was near. A sharp wind blew from the north, and with it came the scent of pine, decay, and something faintly musky. Ava stood frozen for a moment, then continued, leaning against a moss-covered stone wall beside the creek until the terrain began to change. Ahead, just beyond a bend in the stream, she spotted a slope with a jagged rock formation. Nestled in its center was a dark opening, barely wide enough to fit through. Her instincts took over. She climbed slowly, slipping on leaves and grabbing rocks to keep from falling again. As she reached the hollow, her hand brushed something soft yet solid, a torn piece of fabric. It was a ranger's hat, worn, faded, and crusted with dirt, but still intact. The name tag inside was half torn, but the stitched numbers were visible. W. Lewis number 372. Ava's eyes widened. That wasn't a random code. That was Wyatt Lewis, her brother. A name she hadn't said aloud in 5 years. Their last conversation had ended in yelling and doors slamming, long before she'd met Damon. She held the hat to her chest and whispered, "You were out here?" Her voice cracked as if the woods might answer. Sliding into the shallow cave, she tucked herself against the cold stone, curling her body protectively around her belly. It was barely a space, but it was shelter. The wind couldn't reach her there. The light faded quickly, and the temperature dropped with it. Her body shivered, but she dared not build a fire. She didn't even want to breathe too loudly. Night in the wild wasn't like anything she had known before. There were no streetlights, no cars, no hum of city life. Just breathing trees and unseen eyes. Meanwhile, miles away, back at the mansion, Veronica paced the marble foyer with dramatic precision. Her hair was flawless. Her face calm. She spoke to the officer on the other end of the line as if she'd just suffered heartbreak. "She ran off," she said with a practiced crack in her voice. She got hysterical. "She's been jealous ever since Damon, and I begged her to stay. But she just snapped. She took the car keys and disappeared into the forest. I'm scared she'll hurt herself." Damon leaned in the doorway, sipping wine, eyes on the floor. "You sure no one saw?" he muttered. Veronica didn't respond, but the flicker in her eyes said it all. She thought she'd covered her tracks. She thought it was over. Before we continue, if you haven't subscribed yet, please take a moment to support our channel. It helps us keep sharing stories like this with you. But inside a dark surveillance room across town, someone had already noticed. A shadowed figure leaned close to a glowing screen, scrubbing back through hours of outdoor camera footage. One clip froze on a moment near the trailhead. Veronica, sunglasses on, leading Ava toward the path. The timestamp didn't lie. The location was outside the zone she claimed to have last seen her. The footage zoomed in slowly, frame by frame. The person watching didn't speak, but scribbled something down on a notepad. Then hit save. Back in the wilderness, Ava stirred. Her body jerked awake to a chilling sound that cut through the trees. A low, echoing howl. Not 1,
2,
maybe 3 wolves. Not near, but not far either. She pressed her hands to her stomach, trying to block out the sound, trying to calm the panic before it made things worse.
Her knees pulled tighter to her chest.
Her lips moved silently in prayer. Not for a miracle, she didn't believe in those anymore, but for time. Enough time to stay alive one more day. Enough time for someone to notice. Enough time for her unborn child to make it out of this nightmare breathing. The forest responded only with wind. And somewhere deep within it, another howl rose. Closer. Ava jolted awake as a thud echoed outside the cave. Her body stiffened as she strained to hear. The early morning light barely crept in, casting faint shadows on the stone. Her eyes moved slowly toward the entrance where deep claw marks had appeared overnight, fresh, jagged lines torn across the bark of the tree just outside her hollow. The grooves were wide, uneven. Whatever made them had passed close while she slept. She swallowed hard, pulling her knees in, barely breathing. The bear hadn't left tracks alone this time. It had come closer. Too close. She waited in silence for nearly an hour before crawling out, knees scraping the stone, face pale. Her limbs ached, her stomach twisted with hunger. Still gripping the torn ranger hat from the day before, she flipped it over again. The ID number, W. Lewis number 372, kept flashing in her mind. Wyatt. Her brother. The same Wyatt who hadn't spoken to her since the fight after their father's funeral. The same brother who used to patrol parks like this. The same one who told her, years ago, people like Damon don't protect women like us. She hadn't listened. Miles away, in a dusty cabin filled with old wildlife maps and CB radios, Wyatt Lewis sat stiffly in front of the television. His beard was longer now, face older, eyes sunken but alert. He wore the same green uniform, minus the badge. He watched with a quiet intensity as Veronica's carefully staged press conference played out on screen. "We're devastated," she said smoothly, dabbing a dry tissue at the corner of her eye. "We just want Ava to come home safe. Damon is barely eating. I've been beside myself trying to keep hope alive." Wyatt's jaw clenched. "Liar," he muttered under his breath. He leaned closer, watching her body language, the subtle smile twitch that broke her fake grief for just a second. It was enough. He reached across the table and pulled an old binder from the shelf, flipping to park records. Then he logged into the outdated animal tracking system still linked to the reserve's boundary. He typed in Ava Lewis Morgan. No incident report. No missing persons alert.
No coordinates logged.
He checked again. Nothing. She'd never been reported. Back at the mansion, Damon poured himself a drink before noon. He paced the sunlit room with his shirt halfway unbuttoned, irritation mounting with every second. "We can't drag this out," he snapped. "If someone saw her up there or if she turns up somehow, alive, this isn't going away quietly." Veronica rolled her eyes and crossed her legs on the white couch. "She's gone, Damon. She's not built for survival. That forest is crawling with things she can't handle. You saw how weak she looked. Let it go." He slammed the glass down on the counter, the sound sharp. "I don't like loose ends. You should have made sure." In the forest, Ava lay flat on her back beneath a group of pines, scarf stretched out on branches to catch dew. She waited patiently as the drops soaked in. When it was damp enough, she wrung it into her mouth, swallowing the weak moisture, mixing with the bitter taste of chewed-up leaves she'd gathered nearby. Her stomach lurched with every bite, but it was all she had. The bark was too rough to scrape. The berries she saw the day before were gone now, eaten by something else. She touched her stomach, murmured something under her breath, and pulled her coat tighter. That afternoon, a spark of luck flickered in the wild. Her phone, still buried near where she had fallen, buzzed faintly to life again for just long enough. The cracked camera lens had been recording since the tumble, motion-triggered from time to time. Somewhere between signal gaps, a small portion uploaded, a silent, shaky clip of Veronica pushing her. Ava never touched the screen. She never even knew it had gone live. But someone else did. The video, barely 30 seconds long, was posted anonymously. The clip opened with forest sounds, wind rustling leaves. Then a blurry figure. A voice. "You're not just in the way," a scream. Then silence. The GPS tag placed it on the edge of Grayson Wildlife Reserve. No authorities had reported activity in that zone. No permits had been filed for hiking or tours. The internet took notice quickly. A few thousand views turned into 50,000 within an hour. Hashtags formed. Screenshots spread. And a name kept repeating in the comments. Ava Lewis. Wyatt's phone lit up with a ping. He stared at the message from an old colleague. That your sister? Look at this. He clicked the link, watched the clip, and slowly stood from his chair. His hands clenched into fists. His voice, hoarse with rage, whispered, "She's alive." And somewhere deep in the trees, Ava opened her eyes again. The wind was still, but she didn't feel alone. Ava lay completely still beneath a thick layer of moss and pine needles, heart pounding so loud she swore it echoed through the trees. Inches away, the massive black bear sniffed the ground, its heavy paws flattening brush as it ambled past her shelter. Its fur was matted with dirt, its nose twitching as it sniffed the air. She dared not breathe. The scent of earth and animal musk overwhelmed her senses. The bear paused, turning its head just slightly, and for one horrifying second, it looked straight at her. She squeezed her eyes shut, hands clutching her belly, praying her heartbeat wouldn't betray her. After a long pause that stretched her nerves thin, the bear huffed and moved on, crashing through the underbrush, leaving a trail of silence behind it. Only then did she exhale, barely a whisper of breath as tears welled up in her eyes. She had survived, again, but the forest wasn't finished testing her. Back at the mansion, Veronica paced in front of the massive floor-to-ceiling windows, the phone pressed tight to her ear. Her hand trembled, though she tried to hide it. "It's everywhere," she hissed into the phone. Somehow the clip got out.
I don't know how.
It doesn't matter. It's viral now. Everyone thinks she's still out there. People are tagging her name, demanding a search. I need this gone now. On the massive screen mounted on the wall, a news anchor replayed the grainy footage. The fall, the scream, the faint flicker of jewelry glinting in the sun. She stared at that paused frame in horror. The bracelet. Her bracelet. Custom-made, gold-plated, initials engraved inside. It hadn't slipped off. It had been caught on camera. The comments under the video were relentless. Was that the mistress? Why is no one looking for her? She's pregnant. She could still be alive. News crews began swarming the estate gates, drones buzzing overhead. Damon ducked low in the kitchen, watching it unfold on his tablet. "This is your mess," he growled, glaring at Veronica. "You said it was clean. That no one would ever know." Veronica's eyes burned with frustration. "I didn't know she had her phone. I didn't know she'd survive that fall. Just stop blaming me and help fix it." Across the state, Wyatt strapped on his ranger boots, zipped up his weather-worn jacket, and checked the last of his gear.
He didn't call the police.
He didn't alert the news. He didn't trust anyone anymore. With a loaded sat phone, 2 canteens, and his old survival kit, he locked his cabin behind him and started toward the forest. He'd spent more nights in those woods than in his own bed. If Ava was out there, he'd find her. And if she wasn't, he'd find who left her. Ava gripped her stomach as another cramp slammed through her core. Her hands dug into the dirt, knuckles white, as she shoved a cloth into her mouth to muffle the scream. It was sharp, low, and came in waves. She wasn't ready. She wasn't supposed to go into labor yet. Not here. Not like this. She curled on her side behind a rotted log, sweat pouring down her face despite the chill in the air. Her body trembled, and her legs shook beneath her. Each breath grew shallower, more panicked. She couldn't do this alone. Not again. She needed time. She needed someone to find her. Meanwhile, Veronica moved in a blur, throwing hiking gear into a fire pit in the farthest part of the estate's property. She poured lighter fluid over it, watching flames lick the boots, the jacket, even the red-stained gloves she thought she'd buried. Her hands trembled as the smoke curled up into the sky. She turned next to Damon's SUV, scrubbing the inside with bleach, wiping down the back seat, scrubbing the interior handles, and burning towels afterward. She thought it was enough. She didn't see the drone parked in a tree 2 blocks away, watching the smoke trail rise like a signal. Deep in the forest, Wyatt paused. His eyes narrowed. The wind had shifted, and with it came a faint trail of smoke. Thin, distant, but not natural. Not a wildfire. Something contained. Controlled. A campfire, maybe? Or a burn-off. He picked up his pace, feet silent on the earth, body moving with practiced precision. He reached for his old field scope and scanned the skyline, watching as the smoke drifted west over the treetops. Whatever was burning wasn't far. Ava lay curled beneath a makeshift shelter, body shaking, eyes half-lidded, praying for the pain to pause. The forest around her whispered and rustled. And for the first time, she felt something strange, like she wasn't invisible anymore. Something or someone was getting closer. Ava collapsed beside a fallen log, her body giving out completely as another wave of agony crashed through her. Her fingers clawed into the bark, nails breaking, face soaked in sweat. Her cries were no longer muffled, they were hoarse, dry, raw. The contractions had become unbearable, each one longer, tighter, more violent than the last. She could no longer tell how much blood she had lost. Her vision blurred, her breath faltered. The forest spun around her in dizzy circles as the cold air stung her skin. She couldn't scream anymore.
Her voice was gone.
All she had left was hope. Hope that someone, anyone, would find her before it was too late. A flicker of light pierced the trees. A narrow, shaky beam cutting through the branches, scanning the ground slowly. It moved closer, then paused. The beam steadied. Wyatt knelt beside her in an instant, his breath catching in his throat as he saw the state she was in. "Ava," he said softly, pressing 2 fingers to her neck. Her pulse was weak, but it was there. Blood soaked through her clothes, and her belly had tightened into a hard, urgent shape. He dropped his pack, unzipped it, and called into his sat phone. No response. Dead signal. He had no choice. He lifted her gently, one arm behind her shoulders, the other under her knees, and carried her toward the old ranger station, a place he hadn't entered in nearly a decade. Inside the cabin, dust floated through the air, caught in moonlight leaking through cracked windows. The radio was dead. The water supply was limited. But there was warmth, canned food, blankets, and enough medical gear for a battlefield. Wyatt laid her down, wiped the sweat from her forehead, and prepared for what he knew was coming. Ava stirred slightly, whispering incoherently. Her hands moved to her belly. She let out one long groan. Then came the final push. Minutes passed in silence before the first cry broke through the cabin walls.
Sharp.
Desperate.
Alive.
Wyatt smiled through tears, wrapping the tiny baby in a thermal cloth. Then Ava's body jerked again. A second wave hit. Her eyes shot open in shock. "There's another," Wyatt realized aloud. "You didn't know?" She shook her head weakly, lips barely able to form the word no before she screamed again. He worked fast, steady, calm. Another cry. A different pitch. Another child. 2 voices now, echoing together in that remote patch of wilderness. Twins. At the mansion, the television was muted, but the images spoke for themselves. Helicopters. Search crews.
Protests.
The clip of Ava falling now had over 10 million views. The pressure was mounting. Damon paced the living room like a man being hunted. He turned to Veronica with cold fury. "If she's found alive, you're on your own. I'll deny everything. I'll say you acted alone. You dragged me into this, and I won't go down with you." Veronica stared back at him, jaw clenched, mask cracking. "Then we make sure she's not found," she snapped. She stepped into her office, locked the door, and pulled out a contact list from a locked drawer. She found the name she hadn't used in years, Coulter. She dialed, waited, and then whispered, "I need cleanup." Forest.
Silent.
You know the type. As night turned to early dawn, Wyatt tended to Ava, feeding her sips of water, checking the baby's breathing, wrapping them tightly. He couldn't risk moving her far, not yet. But he knew time was running out. Someone had lit a fire. Someone wanted her gone. Still, in that moment, it didn't matter. The cries of the twins were a song he didn't know he needed to hear. Across the world, hashtags surged. Hashtag Find Ava. Hashtag Justice for Ava. Activists held digital protests, calling for an emergency search of the Bear Reserve and an investigation into its mismanagement. Tweets flooded in from celebrities, politicians, and thousands of strangers demanding answers. News anchors speculated on the motives behind her disappearance. And yet, through all the noise, the truth was known by only two people: the woman who tried to end her, and the man who just brought her back. In the hidden ranger cabin deep in the woods, Ava drifted into a fragile sleep, her newborns breathing softly against her chest. And outside, in the trees, something darker moved, quiet, trained, and sent by someone who couldn't afford her survival. Ava stirred as the first light of morning poured through the cracked wooden slats of the ranger cabin. Her eyelids fluttered open, and for a moment, she didn't remember where she was. Then she looked down. Two tiny bodies nestled against her chest, breathing in rhythm, their warmth wrapped in an old ranger blanket. Her hands moved instinctively to shield them. Her breath caught. She was alive. They were alive. Tears slipped down her cheeks as she held them tighter, surrounded by dust-covered survival gear and faded ranger maps pinned to the wall. The cries were gone now, replaced by soft coos and the eerie stillness of the forest beyond the walls. She whispered each baby's name slowly, though they weren't names she'd ever prepared. But now, they felt like the only truth she had. Miles away, a figure moved swiftly through the undergrowth, steady steps, calculated movements, every branch dodged with ease. He wasn't a hiker or a search volunteer. His boots were military issue, his backpack light but expertly packed, his weapons hidden. This was Coulter, the fixer Veronica had hired. But he wasn't just muscle. He was a former reconnaissance tracker with years of deep field experience. He knew how to erase trails, how to find heat signatures, how to make problems disappear. And right now, he was within a few miles of Wyatt's hidden base. But what Veronica didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that Coulter and Wyatt had history. As Coulter neared a collapsed observation post, he saw signs. Footprints. A makeshift path covered too neatly. Someone had cleared this, but not well enough. He followed it to the edge of a small ridge, then paused. A piece of ranger cloth snagged on a low branch. He plucked it, turned it over in his fingers, then froze. The stitching, the color, the initials. It was Wyatt's. He stood perfectly still, processing. It had been over a decade since they'd served together in an elite tracking unit, and even then, Wyatt had been the quiet one, the one who followed the rules, even when no one else did. Coulter cursed under his breath, looked out at the horizon, then made his choice. Instead of heading toward the source of the trail, he turned his phone on, switched his coordinates slightly east, and transmitted them to Veronica. No sign, he said flatly in the message. Signs of animal scavenging. Moving further south. Then, without hesitation, he opened a secondary line, the one he'd used once before to report war crimes in a jungle nobody talks about anymore. He called the federal whistleblower hotline and said just one thing: "You're going to want to start tracking pings near Grayson Reserve. I have proof someone wants a woman and her newborns erased." Meanwhile, Veronica stood in front of a camera again, flanked by a PR handler and a staged forest backdrop. Her expression was flawless. The words rehearsed. "We're devastated by what's happened," she said, voice trembling. "We loved Ava. Damon and I, well, we didn't always agree, but she was family. We're cooperating fully with local search teams." She paused, then added something she hadn't planned. "There's a rocky overpass near Hollow Creek. If she managed to crawl out of the canyon, she might have found shelter there. There's a ranger station not far from there, old, but maybe still standing." The reporter blinked. "How would you know that location?" "That area's been closed to the public for 12 years. Her handler stiffened. Veronica smiled thinly. "Oh, just something I overheard." That clip spread faster than her apology. Back at the ranger station, Wyatt laid out 3 pieces of evidence on the workbench: the phone with the original recording, Veronica's engraved bracelet, and several pages from Ava's ruined journal that referenced the threats, the trail, and a note Ava had scribbled just days before the fall. "If something happens, it won't be an accident. They want me gone." He packed them carefully into a sealed evidence bag, locked the cabin behind him, and made the long journey to the nearest town. He walked directly into the sheriff's office and handed the proof over. The sheriff barely had time to react before Wyatt added, "You need to call the DA. This is bigger than you think." Within hours, an arrest warrant was issued. Attempted murder by abandonment. Conspiracy to obstruct a federal investigation. Evidence tampering. The DA called it a case of calculated cruelty made to look like misfortune. The headline screamed across every network, "Millionaire and Mistress face criminal charges in disappearance of pregnant wife." Helicopters surrounded the estate. Protesters swarmed the gate. But Damon was already gone. He was intercepted at the airport, boarding a private jet bound for Dubai. A customs officer flagged his passport just in time. 2 agents stepped onto the tarmac before the plane could taxi. Damon didn't struggle. He just looked at the flashing cameras, the microphones shoved in his face, and said quietly, "I thought she was dead." But Ava wasn't. She was finally awake, really awake, and the reckoning had just begun. The courtroom was packed wall to wall. Reporters lined every bench, cameras perched like vultures on tripods, all aimed at the defendant's table where Veronica sat rigid in a cream blazer, lips pressed into a thin line, and Damon stared straight ahead, jaw locked, hands folded to hide their trembling. The murmurs died down only when the doors at the back opened and Ava entered quietly, dressed in simple slate gray, her arms full. In one, she cradled a baby wrapped in soft white. In the other, a twin wrapped in navy blue. She didn't look at Veronica. She didn't need to. She moved straight to her seat near the witness stand and sat down gently, the weight of her children grounding her in a place no one thought she'd survive to see. When the tracker took the stand, the room tensed. He gave his name, Coulter, and swore his oath. What followed was a story the public hadn't heard before. The court reporter's pen moved fast as he described how he was hired to erase someone, a woman in hiding. He explained the false coordinates he sent to the client the moment he realized who Wyatt was, the decision to go against the people paying him. "I've seen targets before," he said, voice low but steady. "But not with twins in their arms. Not with a ranger risking everything to keep them alive. That wasn't a target. That was a rescue mission." Gasps moved through the room like a wave. The prosecutor held up the bracelet, Veronica's. The video. The journal. The lies. Layer by layer, the story was pulled apart and rewoven into the truth. When Wyatt was called to testify, the courtroom stood. Not because they were told to, but because they wanted to. He walked with quiet dignity, clean-shaven now, a modest suit hanging awkwardly on his frame. He answered each question with calm precision, never raising his voice. When asked why he risked everything, his answer was simple. Because family doesn't end in silence. And because she didn't deserve to be buried by the people she trusted. After the proceedings, in a ceremony held outside the courthouse, the governor stood beside Wyatt and pinned a silver star-shaped medal on his lapel. "For exceptional courage in the service of life," the certificate read. Cameras clicked. Reporters shouted questions. But Wyatt just shook his head and pointed to Ava. "She's the brave one," he said. "I just followed tracks." The final day of trial ended with the reading of the verdict.
Guilty.
On all counts. The judge's voice echoed through the courtroom as the sentences were handed down. Damon looked stunned, like he'd never expected the world to turn on him. Veronica didn't cry. She just stared at Ava in silence, the corner of her mouth twitching once before she was led away in cuffs. Ava held her babies tighter and turned to leave before the handcuffs even clicked shut. Outside, beneath the trees just beginning to bloom again, Ava stood with a reporter for a live segment that would air worldwide. Her voice was steady as she introduced the names of her children. One, Elijah, named for her father. And the other, Veronica. The reporter blinked. "That's surprising," she said softly. Ava nodded. "Not to honor her," she clarified. "To take back the name. To show that something good can be born from the worst kind of betrayal." That summer, Bear Grace Refuge opened its doors on 100 acres just beyond the Grayson line. It offered wilderness therapy, trauma recovery programs, and safe housing for women escaping abuse. The logo was a bear paw wrapped around a cradle. Ava never appeared in the glossy ads, but her story echoed in every tree planted, every bed made, every woman who walked through its gates. During her first public broadcast, Ava appeared holding both children, now a few months old. She didn't speak long, just enough. "I'm healing," she said, smiling softly into the camera. "But I'm never forgetting. I won't forget what was taken from me, or what I fought to keep. And I won't let it happen to someone else." Her voice cracked only once, and only when she added, "They thought leaving me in the wild would end me. But it's where I learned how to survive." Loudspeaker, if you enjoyed this story and haven't subscribed yet, please consider subscribing now. We bring you stories like this every day. Clapperboard, they left her in the wild to die, but she returned as the mother of a new world. Speech balloon, what did you learn from this story? Which moment or character stood out to you the most? Let us know in the comments below.